What's up everyone, Michael here with an impressions review of Downwell, a fast-paced kind of arcade action style game that I don't really like putting into the roguelite genre, even though it technically is, but I feel like it's more of an arcade style game. Anyway, so Downwell, it's a game where you literally go down a well. At the start of the game, you actually start on the surface and you jump down a well, but since this is a review, I like to kind of start off with the gameplay right off the bat, so I started off after we jumped in the well. I'll go back to the surface later so we can end up seeing that and talk about a few more mechanics later on, but let's talk about the basic mechanics right off the bat and see if you would actually enjoy this game right off the bat, because I am going to be out front with this. I actually love the living hell out of this game. I've been playing it way too much, but so, you get your left and right movement, as you would expect from a platformer, and you get your jump. However, when you're in the air, your character actually has gun boots, and if you look on the right side of the screen, you can see that I actually have ammo and stuff like that. Now, you can increase that with items and stuff like that, which goes into the roguelite elements we'll talk about a little bit later. But you're going down the well, and your goal of the game is actually to get to the bottom of the well, which you probably won't end up doing for a while, because the game is actually rather difficult, and it doesn't have any progression or anything like that, as in, you know, making the game easier or anything like that. So your game will vary depending on the amount of skill you get. You also get different weapons, and so I just picked up a shotgun from one of the side rooms, and so you do get different types of guns as well. The main mechanic, though, is jumping on enemies' heads and object heads as well. So you're going to be going downwards, and I'm just getting hit a ton, and I'm probably going to die from something stupid pretty soon. Then we'll see the surface, so it doesn't really matter. Anyway, so here we just actually completed a stage. That is your goal for each stage, is just get to the bottom. And then here's your roguelite elements. So I'll talk about this real quick and go back to what I was talking about. So you, at the end of each stage, you're actually able to choose a power-up, which goes into the randomization of the game. Now, each level is randomized, and so each time you go down, it's going to be different than the last time you went down. And then you also get the randomized power-ups. There are limited power-ups, so I'll get into that later. I'm going to get... oh man, I so want to grab the balloon, but I'm going to go ahead and get gems cause bullets to shoot up, because that's actually useful. The balloon's not so useful. Anyway, so you're going to be going down, but the interesting mechanic about having the gun boots is actually the fact that it slows your falling down. I died. It slows your falling down. You're able to kind of kick back up and allow you to fall slower. And you can use it to take out enemies, and there's certain enemies that you can't jump on. Now, your main way of killing enemies is actually jumping on their heads. So there's going to be bats, and there's going to be those big blob things. And as you get deeper, there's more and more types of enemies and stuff like that. Talk about it a little bit later. And also there's enemies that are completely filled in and you can't actually jump on them, and so you'll need your gun boots to do that. And here's the surface. You just start off with the surface. It's a nice little place. Anyways, gonna go down and jump into the well. But you're able to use your gun boots to kind of combo together, which actually goes into where I think that this game falls more into the arcade genre than anything. Now, right here, as you play the game, you end up unlocking these styles. You actually get them fairly quickly. I think it took me less than an hour to unlock all these. It was like 30 minutes of playing and I was able to unlock all these, but they just give you different little bonuses. Like this one's a little bit floaty, so it makes your movement floaty. This one starts with more HP, but you get less upgrade options. This one, no upgrades, but cheaper item shops and stuff like that, and you'll understand what those do later on. I always go with standard because I find it to be the most fun. I don't really like the other effects that they have. I think they're a little bit uninteresting, which goes into my negatives of the game. Is the game is actually fairly limited on its amount of content, but I'm going to go into that a little bit later. Right now, I want to kind of go into kind of the stage progression, because your goal of the game isn't necessarily to survive like it is in a lot of roguelites. A lot of roguelites are you're just trying to get to wherever you want to go and kind of stay alive. In this one, however, I feel like it's a lot more of a score attack, as in, as you're going down, sweet. And there's also these extra rooms that you can go into, and they have power-ups and things like that in them, and different rewards. Sometimes you'll get gems, sometimes you'll get a new weapon, and each time you pick up a weapon, you actually get like different charges and stuff like that. So there's two different stats in this game. There's health, which in the top left, that's the amount of hits you can take, as you would probably assume. And then on the right side, you get your charges. Now, the more charges you have, the more bullets you can fire before you get this little smoke cloud, and you can't actually stop yourself from falling anymore. Now, your charge actually recharges every time you either touch the ground or jump on an enemy's head, which goes back into the combo mechanic. You can actually go down an entire stage without touching the ground at all. And so you can actually jump off of people's heads, refill your gun charges, kill enemies and stuff like that. And you actually build up combos, and you get this thing called a gem high, which you'll see at the top of the screen for most of this video. Ooh, shops to start. We're going to do that just so I can show the shop mechanic. And you're actually able to amass a lot of score. And the game actually has a lot of ways that it keeps your score up, and you're actually trying to collect gems and things like that. You can also do time attack. So if you look up in the top left, you'll actually see I have a timer of how long I'm taking. I'm not really focused on the time aspect, so that doesn't really matter. Anyways, here's a shop, so you get these little guys. You can also piss them off by jumping over here. I think it's cute. And then you're able to buy stuff. So I can be like, oh, I need to heal, which is probably a good idea. Or you can unlock charges, and there's other different types of items that kind of do both, but they do one of two things. They either heal you, or they give you charges, or they do both. And that's kind of the extent of the shops, which actually goes straight into my first negative of the game. The roguelite genre is one that's kind of all been about randomization and kind of not knowing what you're going to get. The problem with putting Downwell into this genre is that it doesn't really have a lot of depth in the amount of items that you can get. And so while the mechanics themselves are actually fairly in depth, and I think this game plays amazingly, and I'll talk about that in a minute, the fact that it doesn't really have a lot of depth kind of makes me want to put it into this arcade genre so that people don't have this false expectation. Because when you hear roguelite, you're gonna be like, oh, well, it's gonna be different every time and I'm gonna have a new experience every time I go down. That's not actually the case in this game. However, the case that is true is that the game's mechanics are extremely solid, as in everything in this game is perfect. Like everything that it is, like I have very, very few issues with the gameplay of this game. Now, I can say that maybe you fall a little too quickly, but that also comes into the fact that you're supposed to slow yourself down with your gun boots, and you're supposed to jump on people's heads, which is going to slow your momentum. So you'll be like, oh, I need to, curve around these edges to, keep up my combo and do all this other things and stuff like that. So that's not really a complaint. That's more of just my skill level not being quite there. And as you go down, you end up building up combo meters. The controls are extremely responsive. The game actually has a pretty good random generalization to where you can actually go through every single stage without ever touching the ground. It places enemies intelligently enough that you're like, I could end up, putting this there, and I could end up jumping here and stuff like that. And every time you hit the ground, you're like, oh, I could have done this to maybe not touch the ground instead. Ooh, another shop. See, there's one of the max HP ups, or it could heal you, or it can give me charges. I'm gonna go ahead and grab more health because I don't want to die. I want to try to get to the catacombs. And one of the other interesting things about this game is that while it has this random generation or generation, it actually also has set sort of stages in a way. As in, each stage that you go on is actually randomized. And so, like, this section that you're seeing here will be different than everyone else's playthrough of this game. Or every time you go down the well, you won't be going down the same route of enemies. It won't be like, oh, well, there's going to be 3 blobs to the left and 1 bat to the right every single time. It's going to be completely random. But there are set sort of levels or areas or stages. Every 3 kind of little levels or stages that you go through, it'll actually change the location type. And so the second, like for example, right now we're in the, just basic, we're in a well, that's kind of what's going on sort of thing. But if we end up getting to the next area, we actually go into a catacombs, and then after that it's a water level, and each area actually has different mechanics, such as the catacombs has traps. And the water level actually has an air bubble, so you have to keep your water level up. Now, that's as far as I've actually gotten in the game. I haven't been able to get any farther than that, so I don't know how much farther it actually goes or how many different original mechanics they actually end up throwing, but I feel like that is where the game's depth comes into play, which also puts it more into the arcade sort of genre. And it reminds me of a lot of arcade games where you would actually get far enough and you'd be like, oh, this is a cool new boss with an all new mechanic, but if you die, you start off at the very, very beginning. And so it feels very much sort of like that style of game. I'm going to go ahead and get this one. And that actually comes into one of the biggest complaints I actually have. Now here's the catacombs, so I could at least get to the catacombs. There's some of the traps. They have spike traps and ghosts and things like that. And the enemies actually change as well. So as you get deeper, each stage will actually introduce new enemies as well. So you'll be like, oh, well, I'm in stage whatever. Stage 1 will have all the basic enemies of that type and some of the enemies that you saw before, such as the bats. However, as we go down here, there's going to be new skull enemies and these guys that can randomly appear. And as you progress, the more... Wow, I died. The more difficult the enemy, the more often they will appear. So, like, at the bottom of the catacombs, you'll actually unlock, a bunch of different enemies that are really, really hard to kill. Like, there's these ones, I call them chasers. I don't know what they're actually called, but if you shoot them, they'll turn red and they'll actually chase you, and you can't kill them without bullets. And so you actually got to try and kill them before you actually hit them with a bullet. So if you jump on their head, they instantly die. But if you shoot them with a bullet, they actually become a great pain in the butt. Now, you're able to actually change palettes as well. We saw progression right there. So I just died. Now, what happens when you die is you actually get all those gems that you collected, and they go into a counter, as in the progress counter. Now, at first that unlocks the styles, and so when we jump down the well, you know, you saw the styles and stuff like that, like the floaty style and stuff like that. However, you also unlock palettes. Now, the other thing in the game that you unlock, the styles can somewhat affect your gameplay style, and I personally prefer standard, and I feel like that's the best way to play the game. However, the other unlocks are just palettes, and so you can actually change the color of the game, and so it's not necessarily gameplay oriented, but it is a nice way to do progression, and I actually like it. But this does lead into my main complaint of the game, is the fact that Downwell, while very simple, and it's not that expensive or anything, it's a very small game, and it runs extremely well as well. I should probably mention that. Oh yeah, I should go into options after I talk about this. But my main complaint with the game is the fact that it's actually going to be a game extremely limited based on the amount of skill you have. As in, you saw me get to the catacombs and I died, right? If you're a person who can't even get to the catacombs, you're only going to be playing through this first stage over and over again. That's going to be the extent of the game. And sure, you can play more and more and get better and better and, you know, and get to, you know, the later stages, but some people are not going to be willing to do that. And that is actually where your value proposition comes in, not at the cost of the game, not necessarily. Obviously, it's going to be, you know, it's not a very expensive game because it's a small game for what it is. But the thing is, like, the amount of value you actually get out of this game is going to depend on how much you like this type of game, how much you like hyper difficult sort of platformer, strategy, arcade type games, and how good you are at it. If you're a person who's not willing to take the time to get really good at it, or let's just say you're a person who's not very good at video games at all, you're not going to be able to see very much that the game has to offer. And I'm fairly decent at video games, and I get to stage 3, and that's as far as I've gotten so far. Now, most of that is into just how much time I've actually had to play into the game. You know, I haven't gotten to a point to where I'm like, yeah, I can play this game flawlessly. You know, I haven't gotten to that point yet. I'm getting there. I'm getting better. Obviously, I'm recording, so I'm not doing so well. Ooh, shooting dead bodies causes them to explode. Sucking gems. Sucking gems. That sounds nice. But if you're not very good at the game and you end up dying a lot early on, you're going to be playing through the first and second stage a lot. And the game doesn't have enough power-ups to actually keep that interesting for all too long. And that's kind of unfortunate because I really do enjoy the gameplay of this game. It is very, very fun, and it is extremely exhilarating. And I personally love it because I like that challenge of going forward and trying to get to that next stage. Like, I don't mind playing through these stages to kind of improve my skill for those later stages. However, not everyone's going to have that same outlook. And a lot of people are going to be like, hey, I can't even pass this first stage, and that's all they're ever going to see of the game, which is unfortunate. I think that it would have been nice to have some sort of progression to where I could select what stage to start on. I feel like that would have been an interesting mechanic to throw in there. But I also understand why they didn't, because the game is, you know, a difficult style roguelike game that's going to be, you know, targeting that sort of audience. So if you're part of that audience, you're going to love the living hell out of this game. And its mechanics, like I said, are extremely solid. It runs extremely well. There's one performance issue I have run into, which has to do with full screen. Now, I'm currently running the game in windowed mode for this recording, and there's two reasons for that. One, it's pixel art, and the way they do scaling for pixel art is always kind of bad when you go into the 0.5 range. So I'm just going to be blowing it up in whatever editing software I decide to use, which is going to be Premiere in this case. And it'll end up looking more correct, I guess is the way, because the pixels are going to be exactly 3 pixels, and then I'll just blow it up and everything, and it'll look fine. But the other reason is because the game actually has a VSync issue. Now, let's go ahead. I just got a thing that allows me to blow up whenever I jump, which is actually quite nice. I like that power-up. There's not very many power-ups. There's like 4 good power-ups, I think, in the game, to where like each power-up is useful. It's just the fact that there's not a lot of them, and you end up going through the game with the same amount of power-ups pretty much over and over again. Like, when I was playing before, I was getting to stage 3 constantly. Now I'm recording now, which means that I'm going to be doing terrible, as always. But I was getting basically like the same 5 different power-ups over and over again, because those were the ones that were actually helpful for my playstyle. Anyways, there was a heal and charge thing. We'll keep going. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and go into the settings real quick. I didn't do this earlier. I probably should have. Anyway, so when you're in full screen, if you go to display, when you're in full screen, the game actually has a VSync issue to where it ends up tearing, and there's no VSync option in the game at all. And so you can either force it through your graphics driver if it'll allow you to do that, or you can end up just running it in windowed mode, which is what I have done. I have tried forcing it into borderless, but that doesn't seem to work. You can also get little borders as well, which is kind of nice, but here's also the scaling thing as well. So you can go up to different scalings. I'll adjust the video as needed for that, but that goes, you know, it does the 0.5 thing, which actually adds the pixels to going like kind of off. Some of the pixels will be 3, while some of the pixels will be 4 pixels, and it kind of looks a little bit strange. So I prefer to play it at 3 times scale. And then also you have tape mode. Now this is interesting. And this is the reason why I switched my recording over to desktop mode, is you can actually see this makes it so that the window is actually completely in the vertical mode. Now this is actually extremely interesting, and I like this because a lot of games that are in this aspect ratio, because it is, you know, that arcade style, you know, very much like a shmup sort of thing. Like, that's actually one of the ways I would describe this game. It's kind of like a shmup mixed with a platformer. That's kind of interesting. But anyways, so it's got this, you know, aspect ratio, and it allows you to actually change the window to being within this aspect ratio. Now I'm going to go ahead and switch it. Oh, I died. I'm going to go ahead and switch it back because obviously I'm recording and the YouTube is in that, you know, 16:9 aspect ratio, so that makes sense. But if you want to play this, like, let's say you want to play this off to the side, or you just prefer this mode so you can see all the information up at the top, which I actually find it a lot easier to read that information right off the bat when it's all up at the top. But you can end up changing that, and that's actually really cool. You can also turn on the timer, and you can change the background music on and off. And you do have a general volume control. Now, I wish there was separate volume controls for audio and sound effects. That would be nice. And there's a decent selection of languages as well. You probably don't need to worry about too much about languages, because all it does is changes this menu screen. Everything else is, well, I guess the shop would change depending on your language, but aside from that, there's text really isn't that important in this game, so that is a thing. So yeah, so what is my general conclusion of this game? Well, I freaking love it. I absolutely love this game, and I've been playing it way too much for what it is. I've been trying to get better and better at it. It is one of those games to where it's going to be a large time investment if you are into this type of game and you really, really want to get far. Now, I haven't beaten the game, so I don't actually know how much content is in there, but the main complaint I have with it, as I said, was the fact that it's going to be gated depending on your skill level. And so the better you are at the game, oh, I just lost my combo. You can actually build up combos, and it gives you bonus gems and stuff like that, which is kind of interesting. There's also a lot of enemy varieties and stuff like that. Like the turtles, I can't actually shoot the turtles. I have to jump on them because they have a shell that deflects bullets. Just interesting things like that. Each enemy kind of has its own little mechanics, and these snail things go up slowly. But anyways, so you're going to be gated based on your skill level and your determination to actually get better at the game. And I think that's going to draw a lot of people off of the game if they spend too much on it. Now, if you buy it on sale, or maybe like the price will justify it, or you really, really like this game, it's definitely something to pick up. It is incredible for what it is. It's nothing, I wouldn't say it's something that is like amazing as in everyone has to play it, but if it's your type of thing, it's definitely one to look at. And it's the first platformer where I've seen to where it's actually focused on verticality instead of going horizontal, which is extremely interesting to me. There's been a few platformers in the past that have tried that verticality, but I don't feel like they ever did it well. And this game, Downwell, has just done it perfectly, and I'm really excited to keep playing it. And it's like, there's something about building up those combos and the way the gun boots work and the mechanics that just keeps it interesting. Even without the upgrades and stuff like that, I still find it enjoyable, which is interesting. Like, there's enough gun variety. It's not a great gun variety. There's like 6 guns, I think. Don't quote me on that. And that's enough variety to actually keep me interesting. Now, there are 2 different mechanics that I kind of skipped out on when talking about in this video, but the one mechanic is actually an overheal mechanic. So you actually promoted to keep your health up, as when you're max health, you actually collect another health upgrade, and it will increase those little bars you'll see underneath my health in the top right or top left. And that is actually an overheal. When you get 4 marks of overheal, it'll actually give you another health. So you're actually promoted to do extremely well. By, you know, keeping your health up, you can actually get extra health that'll save you probably later down the line. And then there's also the different mechanics to where picking up different weapons. Now, one thing that I've actually found is that you can actually be like, oh, I don't want to use this weapon because let's say it's a gun that you don't like, or let's say there's the overheal. I just got an extra health because I picked apple, which gave me 4 health, and it made my overheal go all the way up. So yay. But let's say you don't like the puncher weapon that I'm using right now, and you'd rather keep, like, let's say you had a laser, which is basically a one-shot kill on most enemies. And you'd say, oh, I like the laser, but I don't necessarily like the puncher, so I'm not going to pick it up. The problem is that when you pick up a weapon power-up, it actually gives you charges and health. And so skipping out on that actually comes into a tactical play of, will I need these extra charges and will I need these extra health? Or would I rather, you know, use the weapon that I want to use, you know, that sort of thing. So it's got a lot of interesting mechanics, and I think that the game has a lot of depth in its mechanics. maybe not so much in the items. So if you're a roguelite kind of player and you like depths of those types of games, you might find that this game has a little bit more lacking. But if you're a fan of great platformers and great action games, you'll love this game as long as you have enough skill to actually keep going. As in, I feel like that is probably the biggest thing about this game, is that it is a game gated based on your kind of playstyle, and it is very skill and twitch oriented, as in, you've seen me playing it and I'm doing terrible, so don't rate that based on, you know, how good the game is, but like, it can be very, very difficult, and you got to be very, very fast in your reflexes, and the controls are luckily extremely responsive, and so the game itself, I have very, very little problems with. It's more of a personal preference of whether or not you're going to get very far. So yeah, that's kind of my conclusion. I strongly recommend it. If this is your type of game, then I'm gonna pick a balloon because balloons are freaking sweet. I personally love this game, and so I'm gonna be a little bit more on the side of pick it up because it's freaking awesome and I love it. But if this isn't your style of game, it's probably not gonna be worth it too much, especially with the whole skill element that I've talked about. As in, if you're not somebody who's very good at video games, you might be better off watching somebody else play it and see if you might like it. I mean, obviously, try it out. You know, do pick it up when it's on sale or something like that if you like platformers, but overall, it might not be the game for you, and you have to like this style of game to really enjoy it. It is really fun to watch. Not everyone enjoys playing it, which is a thing that I have personally noticed with my friends. Like, let's say my sister, for example, she's not very good at video games, therefore she doesn't like this game because she wouldn't get very far. But it's very, very fast and very, very entertaining to watch the combos go up. And I will say, as a player, it is extremely satisfying to, you know, get those combos up and kill all the ghost seas and things like that. And getting to the next stage, like, let's say I was stuck on the catacombs for like an hour, right? And I was trying to get through the catacombs. When I finally got to the next stage, I was like, yes! And it has a real sense of achievement when you actually, you know, succeed. But the overall content of the game, of how much it's going to offer you, I can't actually say. So that's kind of my conclusion. It's a cautionary recommendation. I recommend it to people who enjoy the genre, but not necessarily to people who may not be into the genre or don't like platformers and the like, and people who may not be very good at the game. There's also a wall jump mechanic that I didn't mention. You can jump off walls, which is pretty cool. Anyways, this has been Michael with an impressions review of Downwell, a game that I absolutely adore. I love the living hell out of it, but I know that it's not going to be a game for everyone. There's going to be people who love it, and then there's going to be people who know it's a good game, but they're not necessarily going to enjoy it because of that skill kind of requirement. It does have that skill gate that's going to affect a lot of people. And some people may not find that it has enough depth to keep them going very long either. Like, I've been playing this game for, I think I've racked up like 5 hours in this game now, which is kind of ridiculous for a game of this size. Like, I have put in a ton of time into this game for seemingly no reason. It's a game that I can sit here and play for hours, but for others, it might not actually reach that. So, you know, like I said, cautionary recommendation. It is a fantastic game in its mechanics and the way it's designed. Its sound design is great. The visuals are great. I will say that some of the soundtracks are a little bit short, particularly the very first soundtrack for the first stage. But after the first stage, I found that the soundtrack is perfectly fine. And I think that has to do with the fact that I've just played the first stage over and over and over again. And so I've kind of gotten bored of the soundtrack a little bit of the first stage, but afterwards it sounds fine. So, you know, everything about the game is great. It's just going to be that kind of personal preference aspect that's going to either make it amazing or make it not such a great purchase. So yeah, that is my words on it. I recommend it, but like I said, you may not be in it. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more videos like this one. As you see, and there's that skull thing. Go away, I don't like you. You are kind of creepy. This game is actually kind of creepy if you think about it. You are a kid who jumps into a well with gun boots. I mean, you know, you could think it's kind of positive, like, oh, maybe he took a rope with him. But no, you just die, like, no matter what. I don't even know what happens when you reach the bottom. I'm pretty sure you probably just die, because what are you going to do at the bottom of a well? You're just going to sit there and be like, I have gun boots at the bottom of a well, and there's a bunch of dead skeletons and blob things everywhere because I killed them on my way down. And so he'll be at the bottom of the well, and it'll be a well full of blood instead of water because he killed everything. I don't know where that thought process was going, but I thought it was nice. Also, we're at the surface, and I think he should stay at the surface because it seems a lot more peaceful. I mean, look at this. It's nice and peaceful. I wish there was more surface area. I wish I could go, like, explore a town and actually get story. I wish there was kind of a story to this game. There isn't, and I don't think it needs one, but That'd be interesting. Anyways, I'm going to continue jumping down these wells, and I will see you guys in the next video.